All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the behind-the-scenes footage.
Every new camera that comes out comes with impressive specs, you know, at least on paper, and says it can do this and it can do this, and it's lighter and it's faster and this, that, and the other. Great, but really what does that mean, or what is the benefit to us as directors or cinematographers? Is that allows us to tell stories more quickly and with better results, and allows us to be more creative.
Canon C700 represents the next kind of evolutionary step in terms of digital capture.
It's amazing when we're looking, I mean, we're almost high noon and these clouds are not blown out.
Yeah. It's got a sensor that is tremendously sensitive in the toe of the curve, and I just love that. I love having all that information down there and knowing that it's going to come up to where I want it without dragging up any color noise.
So as I designed this shot list and the storyboards, was really to design, you know, authentic short film piece about 3 real-world people in Western America, and that will really show off the beauty and the power of this camera and what it can do for cinematographers today.
So I've got plenty of detail in the shadows here, even though I've exposed down to protect all these highlights, because I don't want any of the clouds up here to burn out. And so I know I've got a tremendous palette to work with, even though we're in a, you know, basically a very contrasty daylight scene.
There's energy there.
That's it.
What I look for when I'm first looking at a camera system is I'm looking at how it's laid out and how easy and quick it is to configure into different scenarios. Because on set we have to be able to go from handheld to Steadicam to dolly to low mode, and being able to set the camera up in a way that is efficient to move from each one of those modes.
That is so great.
Yeah, that's in focus.
That's in focus. Yeah.
There was one shot and one scene that I was just really in love with on the second pitch of this steep route called Tarzan on the Grotto Wall Cliff above Aspen. And that was where I was up maybe 100 feet or so and filming out as Ben went out a very steep roof. And I envisioned that with a very wide angle lens, but just about a half hour before final light.
This is sort of what I love about what we do. We can take, a piece of technology like this and, put it in places that you normally wouldn't be able to. And, I was 300 feet away and, had a wireless transmitter on, I had a wireless remote focus system, and we could operate the camera down here. We're giving Tyler the ability to do what he needed to do operating.
We did have the only PL C700 camera in the world was being hauled up in a haul bag, clipped to 1 or 2 carabiners, and up it went there. And so we definitely had to exercise some great safety measures as best we could to keep it from falling to the ground.
The monitor back here. Okay. So you can make whatever adjustments you need to do.
You got it.
Wow. Did we even come close to bubble? Okay, we're ready to shoot here, guys.
What really excites me about the C700 is it's incredibly easy to use. And I'm not just saying that. I had about a half-hour training on this camera before I started operating with it.
The menu system is really well thought out in that there are certain changes that we make all the time in terms of our ISO, our white balance, our frame rate speeds. Very easy to access.
But where the rubber hits the road is, does it look good, and does it please me as a viewer that I'm emotionally connected to my subjects? That's what matters to me as a director, and that's where this excites me, is that as we film from dusk to dawn, high altitude light, to interior scenes in a bar scene or in a moodily lit distillery.
And we're still seeing detail in the bright sky during midday, and still seeing texture in the shadows, which is pretty impressive.
When we were shooting it, even to my eye, it looked like there was nothing in his face, but there it is.
Yeah.
And now let's go right back into our Rec 709 and just bring the bottom up just a little bit. There we go.
The light was falling so fast, and I lit the scene, balanced it, and the shock was that when I looked away from the monitor, there was so little light, I almost jumped out of my shoes because I said, I could barely see this person. But on the monitor, he was perfectly balanced to the exterior. You could make an instantaneous decision just to pop over to 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second. And that happened almost instantaneously, and I love that.
it starts to infuse a life and a breath into the water droplets themselves, and they come alive. And so that's what the slow motion allows us to do.
Codex has been working along with our partner Canon to make sure that we could record all those formats from the camera, 4K uncompressed up to 120 frames per second in RAW, even further 2K up to 240 frames per second. Canon wanted to expand upon what the camera could do with this current sensor and introduce anamorphic viewing on this and capture, and that has also been accomplished.
We're going to shoot through dusk on an anamorphic lens, and we're going to continue to shoot until the stars come out. That's beautiful.
It's gorgeous, huh?
Okay. I bet you we'll get this. I bet we'll get something stupendous.
The Canon Cine lenses, their Cine Primes and also their Cine Zoom, I mean, set a real high standard for film quality and glass and image quality. I can take these Cine lenses, blow it wide open, very shallow focus, and on this Super 35 sensor, we're getting just a beautiful bokeh, amazing roll-off, very pleasing flares. The Canon color science and what it does for skin tones is really authentic. And beyond authentic, it's pleasing.
And a lot of these things we shot on the long end of the Canon 30-300, and they just hold up really, really well.
When we're shooting a feature or a project, we live in this world where this looks pretty much like it's going to look, and then we never really see totally what we have until we get into the color correction suite.
My name is Billy Hobson, and I am a colorist, and I'm also a DI editor here at Shed. We use the Canon Cinema Raw development kit to make 16-bit RGB DPXs, and then we utilized a ACES workflow 2P3 to do the color grading.
I wanted to show how film-like the capabilities were, and I think that we were very successful in doing that, and it was very easy to move whatever information in the shadows or the highlights around.
I was really surprised at how much range the camera had and how much we could really pull out of the details, especially in the blacks. I think the blacks held up really well. It was really actually pretty easy to time, and I think we went with a very neutral, natural sort of correction to really let the camera's strengths shine.
At the distillery, we had one backlit shot, and I had an intense amount of backlight on some steam. And in the SDR version, it looked fine, but grading on the Canon 2420, a high dynamic range, it had power, and it had detail that I just wasn't seeing in the standard dynamic range. I think the C700 is a tool for people to look at who are shooting features, for people who also want a great camera for shooting documentaries, that they're going to find that this camera gives them a very beautiful palette to work with. And in shooting 4K high dynamic range, I don't think you can do any better at the moment.
I think it really sets a new standard for all of us as directors and DPs of what we have access to as a creative tool.
So we have a couple of microphones located and a couple of people to run them at some point. And I wanted to see if I had some questions from you, if you'd like this chance to speak to Russell or Tyler.
Hi.
Thea, why don't you give that to me?
I have two questions. First of all, what were we watching projection-wise? Like what kind of projector? Was that a 2K DCP, or what were the specs on the projection?
It is a 4K projector,
okay.
Although I don't know the brand actually, but it was a 4K DCP. Barco. It's a Barco.
Okay, great. And then the other question, Russell, you were talking about how when you tested it that you had wanted to rate the ISO at 1600. Curious what you ended up rating it at and what Canon considers the native ISO for this camera. And also I noticed for the bar scenes, it's a tiny bit of noise that wasn't there in the exteriors. Nothing objectionable, but I was curious if you rated it differently for the interior scenes.
I could have rated it at 1600. I don't remember, having no memory now, but it seemed like any noise, probably even any noise up to 3200 in terms that you could roll out easily if you need to shoot in those situations. It doesn't take any heroic measures to get rid of the noise. What was having no memory? What was the other part of your question?
What can it consider the native?
Oh, yeah.
The optimal ISO is 800 on that one. So we're using everything based on, I don't think we ever went below 800. And I know we did 16 at some point, but I don't remember. It might have been the bar scene, actually.
Yeah, it might have been. We had a couple of shots. You didn't see them, but I referenced them in that behind-the-scenes thing where the light was falling so fast. I just kept trying to balance to the exterior. There wasn't, we're shooting inside to outside. By the time we got everything balanced out, there was nothing out there. I must have been shooting at a 1600 because I literally I could barely see the.
On that closing shot, the anamorphic closing shot, when it was me and our first, we were out in the field. Craig,
yeah.
Right? I know we did 1600, and I think we did a quick try at 32, but I think we ended up using the 16 for that closing anamorphic shot.
Yeah.
So the native is 800?
800.
Yeah. But if you test it, you'll invent your own ASA, I think. Yeah.
Sophie, down that way. Gentleman with the hat.
How are you guys? Hi, Russell. Nice
hey,
to see
hi,
you.
Steve.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you. Yeah, I wondered. I've had a Canon still camera for so many years, and I've always loved the Canon color. When this came up, I'm seeing that same color, and I'm wondering, like, if you were trying to mix it with other cameras, as you mentioned, could you bring shadows down so it had less of a soft quality and with warmth to the skin?
I think there's enough. I mean, there's plenty of latitude to say I can make this look like. Take it out of what we call the Canon headspace that we sometimes get into, especially with the still cameras. You can take it. It's pliable enough to go in many different directions.
So you could cut if you were shooting with an Alexa, you could use this camera next to it.
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Okay.
Before I go to the back, I keep favoring this side. Anybody over here? Brian, why don't you go right there first?
How you doing? Russell, if I may ask, what were your main light choices for that bar scene? Because it looked great, just very natural.
Oh, that's something I should mention. Given the whopping Canon budget that we had for this,
we gave him a free power shot.
Oh yeah, we had lots of resources. Tim drove the lights out in his car.
That's true, actually.
No, this is true.
Yeah.
I found out how these things are actually done now. I mean, and the producer drove something out in his car, and we asked a few favors. And so what I did was I had 3 source 4s. Do you know what source 4s are? I love them because you can do hard light things, and then you can smack them into a 4x4 something and make them a soft light. And you can plug them into wall units, which is, I think, it's really great. I mean, you can do. So I said, okay, I have Simon, our gaffer, he was there, and that was about it. So while we were out shooting something, he had 3 lights that he could move around, and we talked about what we were going to do lighting the scene. But we were, for feature work, we were really flying under the radar in terms of the kinds of instruments that you might usually have. And then I think we had some soft lights, and then I pulled whatever I could out of my garage, basically, I have a light ribbon, and stuff like that. And then so we would use those in the bar, which we were shooting under. We were really, 5 or 6 foot candles in there. So.
And I can't tell you the budget, but he's right. It was, we had a driver, our camera truck driver, a really nice man named Tank.
Yes, Tank.
And I had to take him to the DMV that day to get his license renewed before we went out of state. Yeah. It was like we hired a guy with no license to drive all the way to Colorado with millions of dollars worth of stuff. So, Yes, one more on this side, real quick. Can we come on down here, Ryan? And then I'll get you.
And I'll say just quick in regards to the lighting, one thing, if I could replay the whole event over again, if I could do anything, it would be just to remove myself from the busyness of directing and just watch Russell light, particularly in the bar scene and the barn scenes. It was just
it was the barn scene for me.
It was amazing. Yeah, I wish I had the remove just to film and just to remember that. But I learned a lot from watching you light, Russell.
Yes.
I actually have 2 questions as well. They're a little bit more general. As a cinematographer, what do you think is the most important thing for cinematography? Like, what's the most important aspect to you, either of you?
Oh, wow. I mean, there are lots of things. I just say, as you go along, the most important thing is probably to have a thick skin, because you'll get rejected a lot. You're kind of like an actor going out there, and you go to these meetings, and it doesn't work out in a lot. But keep going to meetings. That's the main thing. But as a cinematographer, you wear 4 hats. You have to be the artist that you always wanted to be. You've got to be enough of a technician, and know what's out there. Even if I don't know how this widget works, somebody on my crew does. All I have to know is what it does, and I use it as an instrument to light. So you're an artist, a technician. As a cinematographer, especially in features, and Steve Fairberg will back me up on this, you have to be a politician. Because, I mean, both with actors and with other people on the set and with producers. And then you also your 4th hat is that of a manager, because you're managing time, resources of people, and just the logistics during the day. And you've got to keep all those plates spinning. So that's not the most important thing. I don't know what the most important thing actually is. You just try and be the artist you are, and then
get
go
a good
from there.
manager.
That's a great
what was the follow-up question? You said you had 2.
Yeah. The follow-up question was, what's your philosophy on success in this business?
Ooh.
That's a tough one.
Wow, that's. I would say maybe every cinematographer has their own definition of success, and the reason for that is that there are certain cinematographers who will gravitate to certain kinds of material, and for that, their success. Jendra's idea will be different from Stephen's idea, will be different from my idea, and whoever else. The main thing is, at some point, I was talking about this earlier today, you'll find out kind of what your calling is. Whatever excited you and got the fire burning. It's easy to get cynical, especially in the mainstream feature film world, but you have to keep that flame going. And while you're waiting, and at what seems like the interminable times between jobs, keep sharpening the saw, which means keep learning, keep going to things like this. There's so many things on the web that you can find. And then at a certain point, don't start looking at, even when we were working, we tend to look and go, oh man, that thing that so-and-so shot is so beautiful, I'll never do anything like that. Or this person's working a lot more than I am. I say this, but don't let your ambition really outpace your aspiration. That's, but we're talking about the real world stuff of, so.
I understand, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and move to the back. Go ahead, I'll make Sophia run all the way to the back. You pick. Go ahead. Just throw it in the air, see who catches it.
Hi, this question's for Russell. So what I noticed in the calling is the intense texture throughout the entirety of the film. Would you say that's due to the new anamorphic lens and the new camera, or like a combo of both, or like which one really got that texture?
Well, the only first thing is like when I tell people about pre-production, if you want a beautiful movie, you have to find beautiful things to shoot. And I think the texture was just there in Colorado. Certainly the lenses, the camera were capable of rendering it. Tyler, when he was thinking about this movie, he thought about textures, and he kind of baked them into what we were shooting.
And just to be technically correct, the only thing in the movie that was anamorphic was the opening scene and the closing scene. Everything else was done 16:9. So, and we might have cropped to it, but full sensor.
And the other thing that might stand out for you in this, and a lot of theaters, again, I live in Western Colorado, and we don't have a 4K theater near me, but this was shown in 4K, so you're going to see a lot more crisp detail than you might see in other theaters as well. I'm sure there's 4K theaters here, but that's definitely, it's not the norm everywhere. So seeing here, boy, that's amazing crispness and texture. That's a factor of the great projector and the 4K. Which is actually able to be reproduced here. A lot of times you're seeing things, at another movie theater or at your home computer monitor or phone or iPad or whatever, which is not a 4K device.
Thank you.
Good.
I'm a huge fan.
Good. Why don't you go ahead and pass that off, and then I'm going to move to the middle.
All right. Hi, this is for Russell. I was just wondering, with the conversion from digital to film from digital, how has that affected your workflow, and if you have a preference between either or?
Well, at a certain point, we're going to get into things about taste, because film definitely has a gorgeous dynamic range, texture. It has a warmth to it that's really beautiful. And even in the world of digital, when we say, "Oh, do you like digital or cinema?" Sensors are set up differently in cameras, lenses are different, so as you move into combinations of sensors and lenses, you're going to find that. The only thing about digital that I love is I sleep better at night, just because of so many days shooting film. I'm just so, was that in focus? And at least we know now whether it's in focus.
And as somebody who lived through that transition in the still world, Tyler and myself, working for Canon and him as a professional still photographer, I think the one thing that you're going to find, if we hold to what that was when we moved sort of from film to digital in the still world, is that film will never look better than it does today. And digital will never look worse. Give us a chance, like we did on the still side, to get to where we are now with still cameras in a digital world. On your still side, which is a significant amount of your income as well, would you switch back to film, or is it just, would you still make that choice based on what you're shooting? And do you still shoot film still on the still side?
No, I definitely moved to digital with the was it the Canon, the 1DS, I think, stills camera, and didn't really look back if that was the right name for it. No, like as Russell said, the ability to know and craft the lighting and to see the results of that, immediately allows you to be so much more creative in the moment, I think, than and to play and to see what the monitor is showing you. And that's for me, just a huge fun part of the creative process.
For all those years that I would hang out with my cinematography friends, the question always was, when are you going to look like film? Or how do you make digital look like film? And then Panasonic came out with one that was a video camera that shot at 24 frames a second. Everybody said, oh, it looks like film. It actually looked like video at 24 frames a second, but it got closer. Yes. Then we came out with the 5D Mark II with that huge sensor. So you had all this shallow depth of field, and everybody went, oh, that looks like film. Well, it actually just looked like it looked. It had its own look. And now digital we're there. And then, not to belabor the cost a little bit, but I think there's only 2 labs left. So, Russell could shoot film. He'll get that chance if somebody asks him to. You're not going to get that chance. But anyway. Okay, there was a gentleman right in front. If you could just toss, yep, and then I'm going to move to the middle.
Hey guys, thank you. Did you see a difference, or did you, in the testing of the camera, when you tested it, did you see a difference in the grain structure from shooting a 2K versus a 4K, and the noise levels between the 2 different resolutions? And then also, Tyler, when you were operating with the codecs on the back, how did you feel the form factor was for you when you were operating with the length of the camera and the 30 to 300?
Why don't you start with that question, then we'll go to the first question.
So when I was operating in some areas, like on the cliff, when I was hanging there, I wore a chest harness to help so I could lean back against there, and that was with a Cook. Was it a 12 millimeter prime lens? We also looked at the Canon Cine Prime, the 14 millimeter lens. And we actually got a little vignetting with the Cooke 12mm lens, but even with taking that vignetting out, punching in a little bit in the 4K crop, we just felt like it gave me slightly wider for what I wanted for this overhanging root there. So the form factor, I mean, yes, when I was leaning back, anything's awkward that way. It's not a light camera. There are definitely heavier cameras out there. But I would say, and I'm not just making this up, I mean, with the codex recorder and the battery on there, it was pretty well mounted, felt like that way. And we had the rig on there. I'm trying to think if you had any nitpicks about the way it felt.
No, I didn't.
I didn't shoulder mount the 30 to 300 ever. No, that was always on stick.
Yeah, all my work was handheld on the long end. I'm very good handheld operating. No, I was on a tripod.
And so the camera itself is all magnesium, so it's fairly lightweight. It's probably 6-7 pounds lighter than, let's say, in a mirror, just as a point of comparison. It's a really light camera. I think you're going to find in some cases, especially with the heavier front glass, you want that codex on the back for balance. And I saw a picture that Gender put on her Facebook last week with like 30 batteries just to put some weight in the back of this tiny camera. It was like, and everybody on Facebook wanted to know what all those batteries were for. But yeah, that's really what it was about. But when you're out in the lobby, when we're done, put it on your shoulder for a minute. You're going to find it's pretty well balanced. Now to your second question, that's a little tricky because everything you saw we shot in 4K, but we couldn't resist doing some things in 2K, and we did that more for Russell than anybody else.
Yeah, I wanted to see it. I was very impressed with it. I didn't see a really, there wasn't. I think you cut it into this. What we saw, I don't know. I thought it was great.
The camera will do 240 frames a second to 2K internally. And some of the horse scenes.
Yeah, to a CFast card.
Right, to the CFast card.
Yeah, in your ProRes, right? Yeah.
And you can do ProRes, correct.
Right.
But to do 240 might have been aesthetically appropriate for some of that, but he was sort of under a 4K mandate from us to shoot 4K. I don't think you're going to find a huge shift in noise. If you did, I think you'd probably find slightly cleaner in 2K, but it would almost be a perception thing, the way the curve hits a little bit. But yeah, don't be afraid to go to 2K. In 2K, you can go to 2K 12-bit, which is a really nice place to go if you're going to shoot internally.
Is the chip punching in?
No. You still have the full frame. The only time the chip punches in the only time there's a crop factor is in some of the frame rates. Some of the higher frame rates require a punch in depending on whether you're recording ProRes or whatever, so it varies. But yeah, no, it's still the same image.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, let's move to the middle.
Yeah, crops in a little bit when at 240. I remember that. I don't remember the other details.
It's like 50%. But
yeah, okay.
Crops in a lot at 240.
Yep.
But, yeah.
Hey guys. So going back to the lighting, using the anamorphic lenses for those two shots, were you using any additional lighting, and how late were you using?
We didn't use any additional lighting for the anamorphic shots. I think we, just a really nitpick. Like I look at that first shot, I think that was in the dregs of the light, and I think, I was noticing just the teeniest tiny bit of noise in that shot. And I said, as a cinematographer, I said, why didn't we just use the previous take and time it down a little bit? But
and I can't remember, was it 1600 or 3200 for that frame?
Probably 1600. I'm guessing it was. I'll bet there was no light out there, but it was Tim. It was his fault. He shot that shot. What I am excited about, because it's so good with the noise. I'm kind of I want to go out and play with with this camera again. A few years ago, I went up and shot some stuff in Yosemite that almost worked at night, just shooting under a full moon. And I shot starscapes and stuff at 24 frames per second, and with the Canon cinema lenses. And now with the C700, I kind of want to go back and do that again. And I think you're going to see that you can make movies at night with no additional heroic measures.
And if you're really interested in low light, also available at B&H, is the Canon ME20, which has an ISO rating of 4.5 million. I'm not kidding. So, and if you really want an interesting example of that on Netflix, go look up for a film called Blue Jay, which was shot for the Duplass brothers. Yep. And all of it was whatever light they had at the time. They just cranked it up to wherever they could get it. It's actually pretty good. I don't know how they didn't probably go to 4.5 million, but they might have hit 300,000, which is still kind of hard to wrap your head around. So, I mean, the right camera for the right project. So.
And just a follow-up, did you do anything to boost it up in post? Like, because there's a lot of information in the grass in the beginning shot.
No. I think, we were showing the range of the camera in high contrast light, and then you saw some stuff at the beginning in very beautiful dusk light, and I think we kind of let that stay where it was filmed at. I was filming something else. Tyler filmed this. I think but I didn't go out and get into breaking the back of the camera in the sense of what you might do if you were shooting a very, very edgy feature film, dramatic film. We didn't go there, but I'm saying that I know enough about the camera that you can go there if you want to.
Yeah, I just finished on a short film that was being shot in LA, and the DP on that one, pretty much he chose 1600 for everything, and we shot on the beach in daylight. It was just a creative choice. He liked a little bit of noise, a little bit of. There's a uniqueness, sort of uniqueness in the Canon video noise, where we don't have there's no fixed pattern noise in our video, where some video cameras the noise is exactly the same all the time. In our case, it rolls, so it has more of a film grain look to it. That's what he was looking for, even with all the light in the world. I don't know what it did to his f-stop choices or how many NDs he had to use to give his DPs even his first ACs a fighting chance at focus or whatever. But he pretty much stayed at 1600 at noon. So. Oh boy.
Did this version that you shot with have the global shutter?
No, I've never seen a global shutter version yet. They're not here, so we haven't got one yet. My expectation is that I'm not sure yet whether or not it's worth giving up a stop of latitude. If you said, look, I've got this show and it's all going to be cop lights or paparazzi videos or whatever, maybe, but there was very little jello noise in this, very little of the traditional issues you have with a CMOS sensor, a non-global shutter sensor. And we also built in something called, which wasn't necessary for this film and I don't think working yet, but a thing called flashbang correction that you can turn on in the camera that'll help with the issue you get when a flash goes off and you get half frames and things. So global shutter's coming out. We'll see where that goes. And here's the pitch. The camera is $2,000 more if you want the global shutter version. If you buy the camera now for $2,000, we'll turn it into the global shutter version. So, you don't have to wait.
Yeah, and before, I can't speak to it entirely technically, but before we shot this film in September and I was researching that, global shutter versus the rolling shutter and which is better, and I did a fairly deep dive on the internet looking at everything I could about it, and really the results are somewhat mixed. It's not like, global shutter is always better for motion. You can speak to this probably better than me, Russell, but it's not. It really depends on certain cases, and then you can watch on tests that people did of different things of camera moving this way or that and it's a case-by-case basis, I think.
Yeah, the term global shutter is applied by many manufacturers, and it doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So that's why I'm saying I've never seen it. I'm going to assume, since Canon's been paying my mortgage for 27 years, that it's going to be fantastic. But I haven't seen it yet. So. Right, let's see. Okay, I'll get to you in a minute. And then, Ryan, if you can hit this guy next. Go ahead.
Hi. Could you speak at all to your strategy of monitoring on set? Did you use LUTs in Rec 2020, and how you carried that through to post if you did? I'm just curious what your choices were and how and why.
We did not have any special LUT on this going out. The monitors were set up. I don't think we really looked at them too often. We were moving pretty fast. and and really Tyler had an ambitious and really well paced out schedule in terms of where we had to be. So we were a little bit more of a run and gun situation than let's just sit here and have a Perrier and look at the monitor. It wasn't.
But one of the things that kind of happened behind the scenes, like I said, it's my job to make sure the DP doesn't have a bad experience. So one of the things we do without calling attention, we were using the Canon monitors for this, so it's part of our ecosystem, and those have debarring and LUTs directly in the monitors. So in some cases, we were using the LUTs in the monitors to give them a 709 look or the Canon log look, whatever we were doing. But we didn't live on monitors too long when you're trying to climb up the side of a mountain. Yeah. There wasn't a whole lot of time for that. But the bar scene, we had the monitors going, which was sort of like the last scene of the 3 days. And that's when I think you really got this sense of what the camera was doing, because you weren't just looking through the viewfinder. I mean, I saw you in the BTS talk about how much you could see that you couldn't normally see. And that was the third day. So it just gave you a sense of what's on that sensor more so than just the eyepiece.
And I think a lot of times if we're shooting for a certain client, if I'm hired by an ad agency to shoot for a certain client, we're going to want to put a LUT that's pleasing to the client, that looks like the boards that they've put together or the reference comps that they want to hit. So we'll put a LUT on and say, oh, it's going to look like this. It's going to be gritty and edgy, and this spot is going to look just like you want it to look. In this spot, we were shooting directly for Canon and Tim and his colleagues there, and so we were able to shoot more or less in RAW. They understood what they'd all seen test files, what a RAW file looked like, and you can say as well what you guys were looking for, but it was mostly to make sure that we were, making the camera, look good. And as you can see, I mean, we're shooting in the most challenging conditions possible, and it was still holding up. So we didn't have to fake anything that way, but we didn't have to put a LUT on that was going to please a client in some way that way to make it. Oh, I want to make sure it looks like this Gatorade spot in the same way we're trying to compete, with our Powerade drink or whatever here.
Yeah, one of the nice features on the camera, it was out on a TV commercial for Victoria's Secret a couple of weeks ago, and they're very specifically looking for an image that isn't flat. So the ability to, there's multiple outputs on the camera itself. We were able to let one of the outputs to like a video village so that the clients and the makeup people and everybody could see it with a 709 LUT on it just to give it some color. And then to the DIT station, he could see it in RAW. So, and the DP could look at it and go, well, it's all there, it's not there, whatever. So. Next question.
Hi, yeah. My question is for Russell and Tyler. I was wondering, in cinema, what are the cameras that you guys work with the most often, and where this Canon fits amongst your favorites? Yeah, I know this is a Canon event, but I thought I'd ask.
That's why you didn't ask me.
That's a toughie, only because I have. Like what I want to do is go back and do some more work with the Canon. I know I would definitely, I could definitely use the film to shoot, the camera to shoot features. But in terms of, I would say that the things that I definitely know I like about it is it seems to, even though the Alexa is a great camera, but what I like about this camera, it seems to move around a lot faster. I don't know why, but it just did, or maybe, I'm just trying to think that, so in the right situation, I go, I want to work with the C700, maybe over the Alexa, so. I don't know. It's just like you pick the tool for the job, and so I don't know if I have a favorite.
You probably have one you don't like, but we don't have to go there.
I do have one I don't like, and I don't. I don't.
So on the projects I've worked on.
1 second. Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
And I'd worked a fair bit with the Alexa Mini and the Red Dragon and such a bit, and. In all honesty, what endeared me to this is the ability to shoot in a range of light, high ISOs, a real 15 stops of latitude, but not just 15 stops. And then it's like, as I mentioned before, we want to bring up someone's shirt or whatever it is under the cowboy hat, and well, gosh, we can pull another, stop or two of light out of that. That's a big deal. And so I was shooting a trail running commercial in Phoenix last month, and was trying to get a C700 without paying, to buy one quite yet, and it wasn't available. But anyway, the point was that was my first choice. Okay, we're shooting a backlit sunset trail running piece, and this is the camera I know that's going to give me excellent dynamic range with the ability to then pull up. Because a lot of times shooting the trail running, if we're working on a lighter crew and the budget isn't all that big, well, we're not going to have the ability to have 4 lights and a grip team of 8 people to, you know, as the sun's setting to light that runner maybe perfectly. Then you want a tool that can do the heavy lifting for you and save you a big, you know, grip crew and such too, and you can get away with it with a lighter, smaller lighting team, because had to hike up in the hills about a half hour to get there. So, anyway.
So there's usually 2 people I have to talk to when somebody's making a camera choice. You talk to the cinematographer who wants to see the image, and if that cinematographer decides that's the correct image or falls in love with the image, then that check becomes a first and second AD's responsibility to cache. And you know, we had the 5D Mark II was a perfect example of how many people loved that picture and then the image from it, and then we would hand it to a first AC that would go, oh my God, do I have to deal with this? This camera from first and second ACs to me has been the most, what they say the most, which is a huge compliment, is that it's very Alexa-like. It's very much like what the industry's most popular camera is. So, but it's also 4.5K. So think of it that way. I mean, it's very Alexa-like, and it's also hitting all the requirements of Netflix. So.
Thank you.
There we go. Right behind you, right?
Right there. So 2 questions for you, Tim. Is how the C300 Mark II has the same sensor, I understand.
Yes.
With the extra processing power of this camera, what are you gaining that you don't have with the
Changes the image considerably, actually. Yes, technically they're the same sensor, but all the processing, everything on the other side of that is completely different. The curves are a little bit different, things like that. So it is a different image than a 300 Mark II. And it's a little late now, but if I'd pointed out in the BTS, all the head and shoulder stuff was 300 Mark II, and then when we cut to the other one, you could kind of certainly see the differences when you were comparing the two. It has a different feel to it. It definitely feels more cinematic. It feels, and it's a more solid 15 plus stops than I would say than the Mark II, which is rated at 15, but it's 15 towards the 14 side as opposed to 15 towards the 16 side. So there's a little more. And then just the idea of using standard industry connections and batteries and going into a prep house and getting a bridge plate that just comes off the shelf and not running out to my trunk and bending metal to make things work. You know, and not putting 12 batteries on just because I can't balance a camera. Yeah, it's very much Alexa that way. It's very much industry standard. So yes, same sensor, different image.
And then the other question is, you mentioned the flash banding feature. How does that work?
Flash band correction. I'm going to guess. Don't hold me to this as a scientific answer, because so far I've only read about it in the owner's manual and tried it, but I haven't done a deep dive into the technical notes or gotten a great explanation from Japan. But I think they're using a buffer system and then rebuilding the frame. Because I've been able to make it fail if I really worked at it when it's on, so that all of a sudden your image comes back a little bit skewed, and you know, it's not a perfect fill. My guess is they're interpolating the frame before and the frame after whenever that happens, and it happens very naturally and it works really well. But if I'm doing a lot of flashes at the same time, which we had a chance to do on an HBO thing, a test, as well as moving the camera and moving the subject and making it the worst possible conditions, you can get it to kind of skew where all of a sudden the head is not really on the body anymore. So.
Yeah, just speaking aesthetically to the first part of that, when I had my day of testing, I said, wow, and I said there is something different with the processing, and you know, when the Alexa came out, everybody just jumped up and down over the secret sauce they poured over the top end of the contrast range, so you got that beautiful film-like roll-off. And I definitely see Canon moving in that direction, and I know if you wanted to emulate an Alexa. If he said, okay, I'm shooting with Alexas and I want to bring some of the cameras to be, I think you could just totally get exactly that. But it doesn't quite come out of the camera just that way, but you could bake in a LUT that would make that possible.
Well, you had I'll get back to you though. Let's go back up the aisle, Soph, if you're there. Do you have oh, good, you already got it. Well, then don't just talk then.
So I had a question. Are the frame rates fixed? Can you ramp into a different frame rate?
While
and also,
shooting?
right.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
Jesse,
we never did that.
No,
but good question.
Yeah, I've never done it, and Brian apparently has, but no, it's a pre-selected. You dial in and hit the one you want, and you can't ramp during your shooting.
Okay, and the second question was the 15 stops of dynamic range. Is that across all ISOs, or is that?
Yes. It'll shift a little bit in terms of over and under, but yes. And the other thing you think about with Canon Log 2 is about 92 IRE is your top end. 92 is the new 100. So even in the waveform, you're going to see it not ever break 92. So if you protect the highlights on these cameras, everything on the bottom you can pull up. So I'd say watch your overexposures and don't worry about your underexposures.
Yes.
Over here, and then I'll go to Gendra. Go ahead.
Hi, just a quick question about shooting anamorphics. You shot 2 shots, and I guess we're probably 2x anamorphics.
They were two. Yeah, they were Cook anamorphic, so it was 2x.
Right.
Yeah.
So did you have to crop into the sensor for that? Is there a quality loss?
No, it's an internal squeeze de-squeeze.
Right, in terms of if you're delivering, it looked like a 239 aspect from a 1.9 aspect sensor. You probably had to crop.
Well, it's actually a 17:9 sensor, but that's in the camera itself. So in anamorphic, we have a little more room to go. Did we crop?
The target area is taken out of the center of the sensor, so it's not like you're taking because you're starting off with a 17:9. You're not able to like do the classic 4x3 thing. You have to take it out of the center. But I was surprised at how well it hung in there for the 2.0.
And one of the didn't have the 4.5K capable yet, so we shot at 4. So I also think that extra 0.5 will help with the image quality when we have to do that extraction. So.
But to be clear, and you tell me this, I mean, when you're doing the anamorphic conversion, it's that scene is not going to be as crisp as say a Canon Cine Prime lens, 2 images side by side.
Yeah, I'd have to do the math to tell you what. I mean, the file size would say it's 4K, but you've lost information. I'd have to figure out how much is really not there to get that look. So.
Okay, so it still records a 4K RAW file then in RAW if you're shooting
squeezed, and then we unsqueeze it. Yeah, it'll still show it as a 4K RAW.
Doesn't it have to debayer? Anyway.
Yeah, it does, but we do that in post. You still have to debayer. Or with a Canon monitor, you can see it debayered live on set.
Yeah, when we did our first test with the anamorphic, I think there might still have to be a little bit of work done to get to that optimum de-squeezing technique. Because I know we were kind of in the first test we did. We were like, oh my God, we can't. This isn't what I expected. And then they tried a different technique, and then after that they tried one more technique, and then I thought, okay, that's presentable. But I think that there's some rocket science that still needs to be. There's some tweaks that still can be done.
Yeah, you don't understand. You actually asked a question that we lost some sleep over one night. So, and we're kind of reliving it at the moment with these answers. But yeah, we ended up doing the 2.0 with some Canon software, and then with some software from the shed, and then back to the Canon software, trying to figure out who did the best extraction and all that kind of stuff. But so the jury's still out. Yes, I know Gendra had one, and then I think we're getting where we need to go.
I'm curious about the Viewfinder. Was wondering if Russell and Tyler could speak about it, and then also Tim, is it compatible with other Canon cameras?
It is compatible with the C300 Mark II, and will be compatible in the future with other Canon cameras. But right now, no, nothing else but the Mark II.
Yeah, I like the Viewfinder a lot because I was often shooting into, the shots where the climbers are up on the right-hand top side of the frame, and we had all those clouds behind them, and I was just trying to I wanted the shadows to hold a little bit, even though we might have crushed it for dynamic effect later. So the Viewfinder and the waveform really helped, and I've asked, I don't know if it's going to happen soon. But the only thing was that where the waveform came up was right over the two climbers. So I wish you could just flip a little switch and move the waveform over to the other side. But I really enjoy the way that Finder is set up. Again, it'll be like second nature with 15 minutes of shooting with the camera.
Yeah, but just try it out. I mean, in a minute here, and you'll, we won't have to tell you how we liked it. You'll try for yourself. Point it around the room. Point it at dark things. Point it at light things. Turn the waveform monitor on and off, and you'll be like, wow, I can pull focus on this thing. Even in broad daylight, I can pull focus backlit
really
on it.
Picky. Yeah. But I actually think you're going to like it. I know typically the worst image on the set is usually the one the operator has, which makes no sense. But this is really good. It's an OLED. It's a really good piece, and the look around has changed, and you can see everything clear. There's nothing in your view except when you bring up the waveform monitor, but you can just take it off again too. So it's out there. That's why we brought it. So all right, I think we're getting. Oh yes, you were patient, so I don't want to.
We can answer some questions too after, staying around as well, so you don't have to all.
I just wanted to talk about glass for a second. I shoot with the C300 Mark II and the 17-120. This is more geared to you. So, but prior to that life, I was in the 1D series, and I had a lot of the L series lenses. You made a comment about threshold of lenses and a drop off there. Stood by the L series, but shooting on this type of system now, where's that drop off if you happen to have a lot of L series lenses? And the cinema lenses are great, but I definitely see, I want to know where that cutoff is.
The L's are fine. There's been a lot of, there's a lot of third-party Canon mount glass out there. That stuff, EF mount stuff out there that, cinema lenses and things like that are out there. Glass that is made by other people that you'd really want to look at things like the MTF and things like that, and is it rated at 4K? Is it handling? And by 4K, in order to get a 4K rating on a cinema lens, it has to be 4K edge to edge at every T-stop at every focal length, where some of the L glass will be 4K or better at some focal lengths and at some f-stops, and in general still be very good glass across the board. But in a cinema world, that rating is based on testing it from 17 all the way to 120, and that's a great piece of glass, by the way.
Yeah, it's very good.
It's a great piece of glass. I don't know why we didn't use that one. But it's going to have, but every T-stop, every f-stop, every focal length from corner to corner, it has to hit that. It has to hit a resolution to get that. So I guess in a Canon world, if you're looking at cinema glass, you're fine across the board, from our 14 mil Cine Prime up to the 50 to 1000 zoom, 4K all the way across. If you're looking at Canon L glass, most of it is 4K across the board, and it's all still very good glass, but there might be parts where you hit that don't hit that. So 4K in a still world is nothing. It's 8 megapixels. But in a motion, we meet with the camera guys, and they're like, what's this big deal? It's only 8 megapixels. My phone does that. So, but it's different the way those lenses are made, because they're made for stills.
All right, well, thank you.
Let's go ahead and finish where we started. This will be our last one and our first one.
Okay. This is both for Russell and Tim. Have you thought about using any drone technology, and is Canon looking at developing anything to lift the cameras with little props to compete with that world? Because the shots that you guys did with those drones would have been...
No, because they wouldn't have lifted off at that altitude. There was no air up there.
We ran some number. I talked to a fair number of drone operators before. At 10,000 feet, you lose a lot of...
And they don't lift?
Thrust and potentials.
At that altitude, your lift and your time is really limited.
And but to get it to Colorado on the budget that we had...
it would have had to be...
There were no operators in Colorado who could do it at 10,000 feet. They could do it at 4,000 feet. Perhaps.
Simultaneous in September to our shoot, there was another cinematographer, Russell knows him, named Stephen Goldblatt, who was doing a film in Colorado about 8 hours away, or 6 hours away in not Carbondale, south of Denver. I can't remember the name
Colorado
of it.
Springs?
It was Colorado Springs, right. And there was one shot that he wanted with a drone that we were going to use the C300 on, that he had 300 for. And this was a Netflix, Jane Fonda, Robert Redford, big film. And once we got there for this, we prepped it before I went to him. Everything was set. But then when the actual city they went to, the street they wanted to shoot, couldn't get it off the ground. The altitude was there. So then they found this not really relevant, but we'll end on this. They found this other city that was similar at a lower altitude. They thought that's the way we would go. And it took off. And it went, and it was fine. And then I get the call saying, there's no video. We're not getting video feedback from the camera. Every time it goes up, the picture drops out. And I said, if it's recording, I'm not guilty. If you can't figure out how to point it, talk to the drone people. After they shot it, they found out that that particular city in Colorado has a missile silo. And as soon as you hit a certain level, all your video signals are taken out. As soon as they get to altitude, they couldn't see the camera anymore. So, yeah, I don't know if we're working on drone stuff or not to answer your question. But, yes, I think we would consider that. But right now, any camera fits on just about any standard drone. So now maybe it would be a great idea for Canon to partner with somebody to build better cameras for the built-in drones. But that would be a different division for a different time, and not likely that I'm going to tell you. So, all right. So, I want to thank my guests, of course, Russell and Tyler.
Thank you.
And I very much want to thank you guys for coming. We're going to head out to the lobby where the cameras are. You can look through that viewfinder and tell me if you like it or not. We'll hang out there until they make us leave, which I think is in about a half an hour or so. So come on out and we'll answer questions one-on-one.
And thanks also to Canon and to B&H for having us here this evening as well.
Yeah, thank you.